This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss, co-host of PBS's Motor Week. He'll take your calls and comments now at 844-885-4677 or email him at radio@goss-garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Hi everybody, and thank you for joining me here in Goss's Garage. If you'd like to talk about anything that deals with a car or something with an engine in it, hey, they all work the same way. 844-885-4677. Love to talk to you. Now, here's a little story that may shake you up a bit. See, it's going to happen numerous times around the world today. A beautiful, sunshiny, comfortable 80-degree day and a quick trip into the store for a couple of things for dinner, well, can easily become the tragedy of a lifetime. See, your toddler is properly fitted to and strapped into a high-quality safety seat, but damn, those things are difficult to work with. You know the rules about leaving kids or pets in unattended cars, but you'll only be away from the car for a few minutes. So what could happen? After all, people do it all the time and nothing bad happens. Plus, it's only 80 degrees, so it's not really hot outside, not like when it's pushing 100 degrees. That would be entirely different. What am I worrying about? I'll be in and out in a flash. Car is shut off, doors are locked so no one can abduct your child, windows cracked open for ventilation. Hey, you're okay. Once in the store, you remember a couple of other things you need, so you go about looking for them. And wouldn't you know it, as you stroll back by the frozen food cases, here comes none other than your old best friend from high school, who you haven't seen in months. Now, you greet, you hug, and start a catch-up conversation, which becomes 10 minutes of gabbing. Oops, gotta go. The baby is outside in the car. So, you dash off to checkout, but there's a line in every aisle, so you get into the shortest line and work your way through the checkout, all the while cussing the old person who can't manage the chip card reader. But there's a problem. Time has gotten away from you, and your in and out has grown considerably. You've spent time finding the things you came in the store for. You've spent time looking for those couple extra things that you remembered, and then you spent 10 minutes catching up with an old best friend, and finally, that 10-minute snail's pace checkout line. No single thing took much time, but add them all up, and you've been in the store and away from the car and your child or pet for nearly 40 minutes. But not to worry, you think to yourself. It's not that hot, so nothing is going to happen. But you might be horribly wrong. In that amount of time, your car's interior temperature could have soared to a potentially deadly 114 to 118 degrees. But no problem. You rolled the windows down a bit, so there was ventilation. So nothing could happen. Oh, you are so wrong, because tests have shown that cracking the windows open does absolutely nothing to make the inside of a car in the sun more survivable. Oh, you didn't know that? Well, maybe you've done the unthinkable by accident. Will your child be one of the nearly 40 children who die each year in deadly hot car accidents? Or has your precious pet fallen victim to that same hot car death? Thousands of pets die every year in hot cars, and many more go unreported. Children and pets never belong in an unattended car because under the right circumstances, even 70 degrees outside can be deadly inside a car in the sun. The higher the temperature, the shorter the time the inside of the car will remain at a survivable temperature. Things happen quickly and time flies when you're trying to get things done. Always control what can be controlled. Never leave your child or pet in an unattended car. If the unthinkable happens, you will never forgive yourself and you might wind up in jail. All right, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the same thing all of us have done over the years. Most of us have gotten away with it, but you stop and think about, and here I have a chart that I'm reading from. Outside air temperature, 70 degrees. At 10 minutes, that climbs to 89. At 30 minutes, 104. At 60 minutes, 113 degrees, and anything over an hour, 115 degrees. And that is with an outside air temperature of 70 degrees. Now, most of these accidents happen when it's hotter. So let's say it's 90 outside and you're only going to be gone for 10 minutes. That's 109 degrees inside the vehicle. But that gets stretched out to 30 minutes. And now your child or your pet is sitting there in 124 degree temperature. Now, maybe you really get tied up and you're talking with your old high school friend or whatever, and it's 60 minutes, 133 degrees. These are not survivable temperatures for pets and for young children and things like that. So please don't leave them in the car. You know, you never would forgive yourself on this sort of thing. So anyway, that's the topic of the day. Pets in cars. So pets and children in cars. Anyway, children are pets, aren't they? No, not really. Anyway, all right. Let's see, what do we have here? We have some questions from Frank. Let's see, what does Frank want? Frank says, thanks, excellent information. All right, what did I tell him? I hope it was good information. You know, if it wasn't, I'm in deep trouble. All right, here is Frank's question. Frank says, I have a 2007 Honda Odyssey, and with a 3.5 liter engine and 4-speed automatic transmission. What is the appropriate coolant for this vehicle now? They seem to have so many variations in the auto stores. All right, well, the appropriate coolant is any coolant that has the qualification numbers, and typically you'll find those in your owner's or in a service manual. Manufacturers issue qualification numbers that can be put on products that might be used in their vehicles. And those products have to meet a certain standard before they can be used. Well, for a manufacturer of a product like antifreeze to get a qualification, they have to certify that their product meets the criteria set down, in this case, by Honda. All right, no big deal there, that's for sure. But now you have to look at that qualification number. You have to find it first. Then you have to find it on the container, because you want to make sure that you're using a product that is correct for your vehicle. And just about every manufacturer out there has a proprietary formulation for coolant or antifreeze, whatever you want to call it. And the reason is that different manufacturers have different compounds that are used in the plastics in the cooling system. If you look at a modern cooling system, the radiator has plastic tanks, has an aluminum core. The intake manifold is typically going to be made out of plastic. There are going to be various plastic pieces in other parts of the cooling system. There are differences in gasket materials that seal the coolant into the engine and so on. So each manufacturer designs a coolant based on the types of plastics and materials used in their cooling system. So that means that you have all of these proprietary coolants out there, and those coolants do not interchange favorably. Now, yes, you can get by with a one-size-fits-all for a while, or using the wrong coolant for a while, but it's the long term. Like we see some of the GM cars come in with the wrong coolant in them, and over several years of use of the wrong coolant, the intake manifold, which is made out of plastic and has a coolant passage through it, the intake manifold deteriorates, and it often winds up causing engine failure because the coolant gets down into the oil. It leaks where this passage deteriorates from the wrong coolant, or it can deteriorate from just poor maintenance as well. But it deteriorates, and then the coolant gets down into the oil. Well, coolant and oil will mix, but they are not a healthy combination for the engine, and it typically causes wear on the connecting rod and main bearings and so on. And even though you flush all of the coolant out of the crankcase and put in fresh oil, usually within 1,000 miles or so, you'll start getting a check engine light or an oil pressure warning light that starts blinking at idle. Well, that's telling you that there was wear on the bearings, and now the bearings don't fit tightly enough to maintain proper oil pressure, and you're probably going to buy an engine. So, is there any truth to one size fits all? Yeah, if you're not going to keep the car for any period of time and so on, or you're not worried about these things, absolutely. But if you have a decent car that you want to make sure that it's going to last as long as you want it to last, then spend a couple dollars more and buy the proper coolant for your car. Now, how do we do it here? Do we go out and shop all of these qualification numbers and so on? No. Here in the shop, what we do is we order, like in this case, the Honda, we would order the Honda coolant from the Honda dealer that we buy our Honda parts from. That way we know that we have the proper coolant in that Honda automobile, or BMW or Mercedes or Ford or whatever it might be, so that we have no question about long-term damage to our customers' cooling systems and those sorts of things. So I recommend that you use the coolant designed specifically for your 2007 Honda Odyssey. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back here on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Never drive with a bad attitude. I know that's hard with so many stupid, distracted, aggressive, and just plain rude drivers on the road, but it really is the safe thing to do. I drive a lot, and I used to see reckless, rude, or aggressive drivers maybe once a month. But today, it seems like every other driver is doing something stupid. When it was sporadic, it wasn't so hard to deal with, but now it seems like there's always an idiot 3 feet from my rear bumper or weaving into my lane or cutting me off. Distracted? Probably. Dangerous? Absolutely. But there's nothing to do except drive defensively and not aggravate other drivers. Much as I'd like to, I don't middle finger the offending driver, and definitely don't hit my brakes to scare a tailgater. Initially, these situations may be simple mistakes, but an aggressive response to a mistake can escalate it into a personal confrontation, which can easily turn into road rage. Unfortunately, you have no idea which one of these idiots will try to hurt you with their car, a weapon, or their fists. Also, never make direct eye contact with the offending driver. If you're the offender, be courteous and get out of the way. Whether it's a mistake or intentional aggression, remember, back down, yield, let it go. It takes brains to overcome anger. Use your brain. Be smart. Life changes at a ferocious pace these days, especially when it comes to maintaining our cars. For example, automatic transmissions now need regular fluid flushes. Transmission fluid breaks down with use, and although it may look fine, its additives wear out and it can no longer properly protect bands, clutches, seals, and other hugely expensive parts inside your transmission. Bottom line, more wear and a shorter transmission life. Now you can significantly extend transmission life with a BG transmission flush every 24 to 30,000 miles or 2 years. BG makes the best transmission flush machine I've ever tested. It renews all of the fluid in your transmission, not just a small part of it. The BG transmission flush machine is safe too, because it uses the natural circulation of the transmission. Your transmission will work better and last longer. As with everything BG offers, this is a superior service. For more information, go to bgprod.com or bgfindashop.com.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
Hi, for those of you enjoying Goss's Garage on tunein.com, please note our new show time every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, and we will repeat the show at the old 1 p.m. time slot. So those of you who like to watch at 1, still there. You just won't be able to call in, that's all. All right, now back to Frank with the 2007 Honda Odyssey. He wants to know about brake fluid and power steering fluid. What are appropriate for this vehicle? Is it .3 or .4 or synthetic stuff now? And we're talking about brake fluid there. So what are we looking at? Well, there are essentially only 3 recognized types of brake fluid: DOT3, DOT4, and DOT5. All right, DOT3 and 4 are pretty much interchangeable. You can mix them, you can do all kinds of things. DOT5 is silicone synthetic. Now this is where it gets kind of confusing, because like Frank wants to know, is the synthetic variety worth the added cost? Can any of these be mixed? All right, here's the thing that's going on. Most modern cars can't use what is truly called a silicone synthetic fluid because of the ABS. ABS on a lot of cars can cause the silicone synthetic to foam, and that means the pedal sinks to the floor. That means you don't stop as quickly and you could be in trouble. So DOT5 is primarily used for racing purposes or collectible cars that sit a lot or something like that. Now, DOT3, DOT4. Look on the cap. The big difference between the two, the DOT4 has a higher boiling point, which means that it's probably going to perform better during panic stops because it can withstand more heat. Or if you're going down a hill or something like that, a long decline where the brakes have to be applied repeatedly and so on, the DOT4 will stand more heat before it vaporizes and your pedal starts to sink to the floor. But DOT4 absorbs more moisture. So the issue here is you have to make the decision between the better heat capabilities of the DOT4 as opposed to the DOT3, but then you have to contend with flushing the brakes, being more religious about flushing the brakes, not going over 2 years because it absorbs more moisture. So there are pluses and minuses to all of these things. Now, the other thing with this is, and this is where it really, really gets confusing, all brake fluid is synthetic. Now, I don't know why brake fluid manufacturers all of a sudden have decided that, gee, this is a synthetic product. It's not a natural product. It's not like oil that comes out of the earth or anything like that. We manufacture this stuff. And so all of our products really are synthetic. So some manufacturers have elected to call DOT3 or DOT4, they call it synthetic brake fluid. And guess what? They charge more money for it. But guess what? Any other brand, even though it's not called synthetic, has to meet the same federal standards, and you're not going to pay as much money. So don't know how they get away with some of this stuff, but they do. So anyway, all right, let's go to the phones. Let's talk to Brian, who is out in Illinois. Oil change interval. Brian, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Hi, Pat. How you doing?
Yes, sir.
So I changed my oil with the Castro Edge. It's the high mileage. It's, for if it's over 75,000. And it's a full synthetic oil. But it nowhere, even on the internet, it'll tell me the change interval. So I'm not sure, if I can go higher mileage or stick with my regular 3,500 or what.
Okay. The deal with synthetic oils, so many people think because of the way they're advertised that you can go these long change intervals, but the change interval as far as oil goes on a car is determined by the design of the engine and the oil filter and different things like that, how much contamination gets in the oil and all of these different things, which varies from one engine to another. So what they're really saying in these ads is that if you have a car that is designed for a 10,000, 12,000, or 15,000 mile oil change, then you can go that long with this particular oil. But that doesn't mean that you can take another car and go that long safely. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. The normal rule that we use on synthetics is about 7,500 miles for most driving situations.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense what you're saying. So if I bumped up from 35 to 5,000, I would be fine.
Oh yeah, and you could probably go, anywhere from 6,000 to 7,500 miles.
Okay. I was curious why they didn't put any interval change, on anywhere actually. So
Yeah, well, that's because oil companies typically don't make change recommendations other than that they advertise that you could go however long and things like that. But what they rely on what the vehicle manufacturer has determined, because if they say something other than what the vehicle manufacturer says, they're in big stuff.
problems.
Yeah, you void warranties and all kinds of things.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pat. I really enjoy your show.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. This business with these ads and so on that are so deceiving. You have to wonder how big the legal department is in some of these ad agencies and so on, so that they can develop these ads, make them so misleading, and yet still make them legal and avoid lawsuits and all the rest of it. Pretty clever stuff, really, but the thing of it is, synthetic oil, you don't change your car over to synthetic so that you can go significantly longer. You can go a little bit longer, that you can go significantly longer between oil changes. The reason you put synthetic in your car is because you want your engine to last longer, and that's what synthetic oil does. It makes engines last longer. Hey, let's take a break. We'll be right back on Goss's Garage.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
I get lots of air filter questions, and one of the most common deals with why air filters need to be replaced so often. Well, actually, they usually don't, yet many drivers wind up buying a new air filter at every oil change, which is utterly ridiculous. Drivers say techs tell them if they don't buy a new air filter, they'll waste a lot of gas. Maybe that statement comes from ignorance or maybe dishonesty, but either way, you lose. Decades ago, dirty air filters did waste gas, but today, not so much. Cars now use a sensor to measure the air coming through the air filter, and computers to mix exactly the right amount of gas to match that air. So even though a dirty air filter reduces airflow into the engine, it doesn't affect gas mileage because the computer is always precisely matching fuel to the incoming air. In other words, a dirty filter means less air, and less air means less gas, so there's never an imbalance between air and fuel. Certainly when a filter gets really, really dirty, it can cause performance problems, but even then it may not affect gas mileage. So how long do air filters last? Unless you drive in really dusty conditions, air filters usually last 30 to 60,000 miles. Overselling of air filters is an enormous problem, and the best way not to be taken is to learn how to check your own air filter and check it twice a year. I get lots of questions about BG products, many about specific products or services like, is BG44K really that good, or are BG transmission, cooling system, and power steering flushes actually necessary? But most popular of all, do I use BG products in my cars? Well, the answer to all of those questions is yes. A regular schedule of BG flushes and chemicals will deliver the longest possible life from all the lubricated and fuel delivery parts on your vehicles. And do I use BG products? You bet I do. I drive nice cars, and I drive a lot. Plus, my live radio and TV shows mean that my cars have to be absolutely reliable. A no start from dirty fuel injectors or a failed transmission just isn't acceptable in my life. Remember, deposits and dirty fluids ruin expensive parts. For reliability like I demand, visit one of the quality shops that sell BG products and perform BG services. To find a BG professional near you, bgfindashop.com.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
This portion of Goss's Garage is brought to you by BG Products. Yes, I use them and I sell them. And so there, you doubters that want to rag on me all the time. Yes, I sell them. Absolutely, I sell them. I've sold them for years. That's no secret. All right, anyway, Frank also wanted to know about power steering fluid for his Honda. Well, go into a store and you may find one size fits all. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Power steering fluid is much like coolant and other products for cars these days, automatic transmission fluid and so on. It is formulated with various additives and so on that are designed to be compatible with the parts in the power steering system. Okay, now, what can go wrong here? One of the things that we see, people use a universal fluid or they use transmission fluid in their power steering. And the car will come in. Power steering fluid is just black. I mean, it looks like tar from the road. So what's going on here? Well, they used the wrong fluid, and remember that this fluid travels through rubber hoses. Now let's face it, rubber can be formulated in thousands of different ways. That's why you have different types of tires and so on to give you different grip characteristics for different types of weather and things like that. And that's all based on the rubber compound, how the rubber is formulated, how much carbon black it has, how much all of these other things that make it elastic and so on. So you have the same thing with power steering hoses. Put the wrong fluid in there, and what you might wind up with is the fluid attacks the inside of the hoses. And of course the rubber hoses are black, and this wrong fluid causes the inside of the hose to deteriorate, and what you're actually seeing as far as the really dark fluid is concerned is little particles of rubber that have been shed on the inside of the hose because of the wrong fluid. It's deteriorating the hoses. No big deal, you say. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Because lots of times it'll do in the power steering pump, lots of times it'll do in the power steering rack. And if it doesn't do anything other than damage the hoses, some of these power steering hoses are outrageously expensive. So it pays to use the products recommended by the vehicle manufacturer. And yes, Frank, I would, on that Honda, I would use Honda power steering fluid. Again, that's what we do here in the shop. All right, this is from Joe. Joe says, is it safe to switch from Dex Cool to green antifreeze in my 2001 Buick Century? Listen to you in my office every week. Thanks, Joe. Well, Joe, thank you for listening. We certainly appreciate that. And can you go to the green coolant? Sure, you can. And is it safe? Well, depends what you call safe. If you're looking for the protection against freezing, yeah, the green stuff will protect against freezing just like the Dex Cool that's supposed to be in the car. Will it protect all of the plastic and metal parts in the engine like the Dex Cool? No. See, Dex Cool and most other modern coolants are what are called OAT coolants, O-A-T, organic acid technology. Now, they are put in the car in the engine when the car is new. And what they do, they are very acidic. So they corrode the whole inside of the cooling system. Now, you might think that that's detrimental, but if you look on interstate highways and places, you'll often see these really rusty looking lampposts and sometimes bridges and things like that. And you say, oh my God, why don't they paint that thing? Well, they don't paint it because what happens is you get this thin layer of corrosion that builds up on the outside of a piece of metal, or in this case, on the inside of it, inside the engine. Now, once that thin layer of corrosion has formed, it acts like a barrier against further corrosion. See, when you paint a lot of things, you'll get blisters in the paint. The blisters hold moisture. The moisture causes corrosion, which causes more blisters, which causes more moisture, which causes more corrosion, and on it goes. So, with the method of causing a little bit of corrosion to protect the metal, that works really well inside the engine. So once you put the green coolant in it, all of that protection is gone, and you can never reestablish it in any other manner other than taking the engine out of the car, disassembling the engine, having it what's called hot tank cleaned so that there's no even a teeniest little residue of the green coolant in there, and then refilling it with the Dexcool, the oat antifreeze. So if you're willing to give up that kind of protection to save, what, $4 on a gallon of coolant, which is something that has always amazed me, we'll take a car that is worth thousands of dollars and we'll try to cut corners $2, $3, $4, something like that on a gallon of antifreeze, and it just makes no sense. So I really I don't know. Really doesn't make sense to me. Personally, I would buy what belongs in the car. I would put it in there. I would use it. I would be comfortable with it. I would check it routinely. But if you don't care about the car, it is, after all, an old car. Cut corners. I don't know how many miles are on it or anything like that, so how much life it has left, I have no idea. So maybe that does make sense. But anyway, so much for that. Yes, you can put the green coolant in there. All right, Michael wants to know, he says, well, wait a minute, before we do this, because this one gets a little bit involved, before we do this next question, let's take a break. We'll be right back on Goss's Garage.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Space Saver spare tires sure do look silly, but if you use them properly, they will get you home safely. Now, a common problem with them is low air pressure. Spares are buried in the trunk and no one ever seems to check their pressure. Plus, they typically require much higher pressure than your regular tires. Also, Space Saver spares have limits on how far and how fast you can drive on them. Bottom line, always read and follow the caution warnings on their labels and sidewalls. Oh yeah, don't be one of those poor schmucks with a flat tire and a flat spare. Check your spare once a month. While checking the spare, look at the jack handle, and the lug wrench to be sure everything is there and in working order. The best spare tire in the world is useless without the tools to put it on the car. Some cars may even require special lug nuts to mount the spare. If those special lug nuts are missing, you will have no safe way to use your spare. Life changes at a ferocious pace these days, especially when it comes to maintaining our cars. For example, automatic transmissions now need regular fluid flushes. Transmission fluid breaks down with use, and although it may look fine, its additives wear out and it can no longer properly protect bands, clutches, seals, and other hugely expensive parts inside your transmission. Bottom line, more wear and a shorter transmission life. Now you can significantly extend transmission life with a BG transmission flush every 24 to 30,000 miles or 2 years. BG makes the best transmission flush machine I've ever tested. It renews all of the fluid in your transmission, not just a small part of it. The BG transmission flush machine is safe, too, because it uses the natural circulation of the transmission. Your transmission will work better and last longer. As with everything BG offers, this is a superior service. For more information, go to bgprod.com or bgfindashop.com.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
Hey folks, please subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, and for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. All right. Let's see, what do we have here? Michael has a question regarding some of the things that I discussed on one of the Motor Week segments. Now, it's interesting that in the commercial break, we were just talking about temporary spares and things like this. And Michael says, I recently watched your Motor Week segment titled Spare Me, and you spoke with Tom Taylor from rockauto.com. It's mentioned in the video not to exceed the speed limit warning when using a Doughnut spare tire because it can cause axle and even transmission damage if you go too fast or too long. Absolutely correct. They put the warnings on those temporary spares so that you use them in a temporary situation. They want you to put the spare on. They want you to drive to the nearest facility, get the proper tire repaired or replaced, take the spare, the temporary spare off, put it back in the trunk, and that's it. And the reason is that the temporary spare is usually smaller, so it turns at a different speed than the full-size tire on the opposite side of the car. Now, if that happens to be on the drive wheels of the car, that means that there are gears that don't normally turn all the time inside the differential, turning all the time, and that adds wear to them. So the big thing is to spend time or to follow the directions that come with that spare tire. Don't exceed the speed limit. Don't exceed the distance that you're supposed to use them. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's talk to Kenny from Australia. 2004 Ford Focus. Kenny, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Hello, good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I've just got a question about if I don't have a full history record of a used car. What precautions should I do for the service?
All right, this is an '04 Ford Focus.
Yes.
All right, and you have no idea what the history of it is.
Yeah, no.
All right, what I would do is go through and do all of the flushes, the power steering, the cooling system. If it's an automatic transmission, I would flush the automatic. If it's a manual, I would change the gear oil. And then just give the car a good, thorough check from one end to the other, paying close attention to anything that's made out of rubber, because rubber deteriorates over time. Sunlight causes deterioration of rubber and so on. So all of the rubber parts plus all of the flushes, and then you should be good to go.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, take care. Thanks for the call. All right. Now, back to Michael. He says, my question is, even if you follow these warnings and drive slow when the Doughnut spare is installed on one of the driving wheels, could this still cause excessive wear or permanent damage to the transmission or the limited slip differential? Do you recommend only putting a spare tire on a non-driving wheel and then swapping a good tire to the driving wheel? All right. You know, in a perfect world, yeah, that business of putting the spare on a non-drive wheel, but you know, with so many cars having all-wheel drive these days, that would be really difficult to do. So, does it really cause permanent wear or excessive wear or anything like that? No, as long as you follow the rules that are written on that tire, and usually they're right on a label on the tire itself, on that temporary spare. That is giving you the safe limit. What it's going to do is it's going to keep temperatures under control. It's going to keep everything so that there is proper lubricant movement and so on. Where you're going to get into trouble is when you think that a tire marked do not exceed 55 miles an hour means do not exceed 85 miles an hour. All right, so you're an idiot and you're going to pay for it. And yeah, you probably will at some point in the life of the car. That is, if you live long enough to enjoy the benefits of tearing up the differential in your car. So, you know, read and follow label directions and everything will be fine. The business of putting the spare onto or a non-drive wheel and then transferring the full-size tire to a drive wheel, yeah, that's a great idea, but let's face it, you're outside the road. Do you have two jacks? Do you have a safe place to do all of this and so on? I would think twice about that, simply because of the dangers involved changing just one tire, much less two tires, beside the interstate. I mean, that's a deadly situation to begin with. Lots and lots of people get hurt or killed, even though they're completely off the road. The four-way flashers are on, the warning triangles, all of this stuff is up. You put out flares. Idiots still swerve off the road, run into people changing tires and so on. So I would think twice about that. Now, Michael also says you had a recent segment about rats chewing hose and wiring insulation and building nests in the engine bay. I had this issue a while back, and my father recommended spreading mothballs underneath the car where it's parked at home. I've been doing it for about 6 years now and haven't had any problem with rats building nests or chewing insulation since. Seems to be a good repellent. Thank you for your time and suggestions. All right, well, Michael, I don't know about putting the mothballs under the car. Something I've never heard of before. The typical thing that everybody said to do was to take mothballs and put them in a small cloth bag and put them under the hood of the car. Well, okay, we found out that that does not work at all. It doesn't even deter the rats at all. And usually it isn't rats. Usually it is field mice that do most of the damage. They build nasty, I mean absolutely nasty, stinking nests in various parts of the car. And we've shown you some on Motor Week and other shows that I do, and they are gross to a fault. Anyway, what we have found is that there is, there's usually going to be some food source that's too close to the car. That may be that you're parking it under a tree that has nuts or something that the seeds or something that the critters like to eat, and they grab them up and then they look for a warm, cozy, dark place. And what could be warmer, cozier, or darker than inside the ductwork for the air conditioning or something like that on an automobile? So, food sources, that's a big cause of problems. You need to get rid of all the food sources. We find a lot of people don't think that grass seed in the garage is a food source for field mice. Well, it is, and it's also a great way to get field mice under the hood and eating at your car and building nests in it and so on. It's kind of an issue. Now, another thing that contributes to this problem, a lot of vehicle manufacturers have gone green in their manufacturing process. And by that, what some of them are doing, the insulation on the wires that are used to build the car, the electrical wires, is made from soy. So here we have this lovely food source surrounding the wires in the car, and the mice, I don't know how they figure it out, but they get in there, and that's one of the reasons why we see a lot more of this on newer cars, is because of soy-based wiring insulation. And you see other things in cars that are built with soy-based products, and you might find them eating the underside of your dashboard or who knows what. Well, one way, if you have soy-based wire, is you can go to Honda. They're the only ones that I know of that have it right now. You can buy tape to wrap the wire harness with. The tape is impregnated with capsaicin and some nasty stuff that the critters don't like. So, but as far as mothballs under the car, I don't know. We'll have to play with that and see how it works. And if anybody else has information on that, let me know. All right, this is from Lynn. Pat, I've heard you mention the modified X when it comes to rotating tires. What does that mean exactly, and how would it apply to a larger vehicle like a bus or a dump truck? All right, well, a modified X. What a modified X is that you take the tires from the non-drive wheels of the car. Let's say we have a front-wheel drive car. we're going to take the right rear and put it on the left front. And we're going to take the left rear and put it on the right front. And yeah, I know you've got these completely out of it, dumb as a post technicians who say, oh, you can't put a radial tire on the other side of the car. Okay, if you want to deal with that kind of people, deal with them, listen to them, whatever. But that is just absolute BS. All right, now, the front-wheel drive, right rear to left front or left rear to right front, and then the front tires stay on the same side of the car and move to the rear wheels. Now you would reverse that if you had rear wheel drive. In other words, the drive wheels would be on the rear, so the left front would go to the right rear, the right front would go to the left rear, and the rear tires would move to the front but stay on the same side of the car. Now if you do that, and as you do multiple rotations, you'll find that the tires move around the car in different positions, and you'll find that they wear a lot, and I mean a lot better, get a lot more life out of them, and you won't find that you have wear patterns from alignment and things like that, because if you're doing it properly, the tires are never in one spot on the car long enough for them to take a wear pattern. So overall, it's a really good deal. Now, does it apply to larger vehicles like a bus? Well, there are rotation patterns for buses and trucks and so on, but it depends on whether or not they are twin axle in the rear or single axle. All these bigger vehicles will have dual wheels on the back, so there's a special dual wheel rotation pattern. And then if they have two axles on the back instead of one, then that pattern gets more complicated. So, I couldn't go through all of it because I can't remember all of it about the proper rotation patterns for those bigger vehicles. And I'm not sure how many people that own them actually rotate the tires that frequently anyway. And the other thing to keep in mind is the tires used in buses and over-the-road trucks and so on are very, very different in the way they're made and the tread pattern and so on than what car tires are. So the wear patterns are different and so on. All right. Hey, we have done it one more time. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Steve McMillan, Stevie McMillan, and George Stockton for producing today's show. For everyone here at Goss's Garage, I'm Pat Goss. Until next time, please, everybody, please drive gently. See ya.